Good afternoon, Saints. Welcome to Bettye's 2 p.m. Zoom room study session. Yes, a late afternoon virtual Bible study brought to you by way of Healing Hands Ministry as a part of the Open Book series. I'm Pastor Stevens, the facilitator of this study session, inviting you to open your hearts and your minds as I open the book. Let's get at it. Hey guys, how you doing? Let me apologize for um, Wednesday session at 2. I was hoping that I would be able to get back uh, to my desk to be able to upload from Birmingham. I was in conference, but it didn't work out that way, so I had to uh, do it later. So this is later. I'm doing it now. So I hope that you'll catch up, and my apologies again for not having the time to do everything I'm supposed to be doing. Well, we opened our discussion of the Jude, uh, and we've gotten a real sense of who he is. He's the older half brother of Jesus, James's older brother. So we're looking at family, and I thought it would be interesting, since we've studied James, to just shift right into Jude. The first thing that we encounter after we open the text is we're looking at Jude gives his serious purpose. What occasions the letter? Why am I writing the letter? Jude tells us, uh, and he identifies the recipients of his letter as the beloved or dear friends, uh, and literally the agape toy, those who love with the love of God, who love as Christ is loved, the agape toy. Uh, the way he describes how he came to write the letter is kind of interesting. He had to, he was compelled, it seems, to write a positive statement of the Christian faith. Whether he was actively engaged in writing or just thinking about it or trying to prime himself up to write it is uncertain. But the text is clear, making every effort to write, preparing to write to you about the salvation, while eagerly preparing. I guess that does suggest that he hadn't really started yet, but yeah, it's kind of hard to really put your finger on that. So, but the idea here is that uh, he found it necessary to write to them about the faith, uh, the faith. Interesting phrase. The salvation that they shared, we shared, our common salvation. Uh, they now possess the salvation and a hope of salvation, I guess I should say. And they long for Christ, who will appear a second time to bring salvation to those who are waiting for him. This is the agape toy. This is the consciousness that's being addressed here. He said, I found it necessary to write an appeal to you to continue the faith that was once and for all handed on to the saints. So we have this, in his understanding is, we have this secured consciousness of salvation, secured, steadfast, locked in. And his argument is that he needed to contend for the faith. He was just going to write them in general about the faith, but he's come up with a more focused effort here to contend for the faith, to contend for the faith. This notion of contending for the faith is interesting. I want you to hear this because the letter is intended, Jude's letter is intended to exhort his readers to struggle for the faith that was once for all entrusted to the saints, to struggle, to contend. Now, when you check the Greek on that word, contend or to struggle, the basic meaning of the word is that of the intense effort in a wrestling match. Can you believe that? to contend for the faith is to really, really focus one's attention on in a competitive kind of way, to really contend, to be dogmatic. This is the way Christ has given it to us, and there's no changing it. There's no altering it. There's no suggestion of anything other than what it is. As we say around, it is what it is, and there is no alteration that can be brought to it. Okay, that's the idea. That's the whole substance of the matter. Okay, to contend for the faith. The verb is in the present infinitive tense, so that's showing that he's talking about the Christian struggle is to be continuous. We're never to let up on the notion of the faith. Now, the faith, that's an interesting phrase. The faith, those collection of ideologies, of thoughts that we believe were given to us by the Christ, the faith. Contend for those contentions, those platforms of faith. Christ is the Son of God, and God sent. Come on, contend for the faith, struggle with it. The faith is that body of truth that was very early in the church's history, took on a definite form, a collection of teachings that associated directly with the text. But without a doubt, the form of the faith as a body of recognized truth became clearer as time passed. Jude stresses that this faith has been entrusted once for all to the saints, the ones that were set apart by God for himself, the elect, Paul would say, the saints that were set aside by God for himself. He says that that's our focus, that we safeguard the faith. Oh my goodness, I wish, honey, I wish the church had a sense of that, but we're so inclined to acquiesce to the demands of the world, and our desire for worldly wealth is so overwhelming that $2-3 and we'll sell out the whole situation. But Jude is arguing that the basic Christian faith cannot be changed. Its foundational truths are not negotiable in any way whatsoever. And this conviction is not, of course, peculiar to Jude. This is the New Testament disposition. One of the things that we have to learn, we meaning contemporary believers, is we have to learn that these compromises and these additives and these shifts that we make in determining what is the faith, we need to be mindful of that. Jude goes on to explain in verse 4 why he was compelled to write. Ungodly men had secretly kind of slipped in and among them. They were unaware of them. As believers, they were totally not clear on what was happening. Paul would call them Judaizers that had infiltrated the Christian congregation to spy on their freedom in Christ. He writes to the Galatians, but concerning these men, it's easier to be in a body of believers and just assume because everybody is saying the same words that we all believe the same thing. I think it's really important that we clarify what is it that you believe, to make sure that the articles of faith are in place. There are lots of people who don't believe that Jesus Christ was fully human. They see him as some kind of demigod-like character. He was both man and God at the same time. And so you have to be careful with how you listen to, or how you assume, rather, that just because someone is saying they love the Lord, that is Jesus Christ. Okay? Let's see. Now, he says that these people have been condemned by the prophets of old. uh, long before they showed up. The condemnation was written about long ago. So he's referring to the false prophets of old. And he's saying that these false teachers of now have the same condemnation that the false teachers of old had. The judgment of God, the wrath of God pours on them, falls on them in the same manner. Um, um, that somehow or another, well, not somehow or another, but that God in his infinite wisdom, um, he locks in on the movement against his Christ. I want to take time right here to really suggest that we think clearly, very clearly about this, because before the coming of Christ, uh, the sinful nature of man had rendered the law useless. People knew the law, but the spirit of the law was unknown, and people lived in accordance to uh, uh, their own whims with the law. And Paul, and Jesus saw that the law was not moving the lives of men and women, and that the prophets and all their efforts could not get the job done. Okay, but God was tolerant of the struggle of his people to from Adam to the coming of Jesus, very tolerant of their foolishness, of their apostatism, their rejection, flat out rejection, and their refusal to live pure lives as the people of God. He was tolerant of that. Then comes the Christ, and the Father God changes. He moves from a tolerant God to an intolerant God in the matters of his Christ. His sending the Son, the begotten of the Son, registers now in the New Testament as an intolerable God. To reject Christ, to neutralize Christ, to demean Christ, is to reject God himself. Okay, and that becomes a powerful statement. And if you hear it and hear it correctly, you can see the New Testament unfolding in such a way that God's final word to his people is in Christ Jesus. And if you reject the Christ, you have rejected God himself. So this idea of saying in verse 4, for certain intruders, these interlopers of sorts, have stolen into among you. And he says, first of all, their condemnation is already set in place. God ain't playing with that. Okay. They not only stolen in and brought condemnation on themselves because they are anti the teachings of the community, but they pervert the grace of God and give leniency and power to licentiousness. That hey, it is what it is. It's just a thing. Debauchery and that's a statement of the kind of life they lived. A hedonistic consciousness, just pleasure centered, and they deny our only Master and Lord Jesus Christ, the dismantling of the Christ. This is an intolerant place. And so that's why when he spoke of it, he spoke of it in light of the judgment of during the day of the prophets. Okay. So we're clear now in 3 and 4 what occasions this letter and his intensity, Jude's intensity around what he's saying. It's something we need to understand, and that the destiny of these impious or ungodly people, these notorious sinners that are inside of the house. We got to be careful with our understanding of what God thinks of and feels about our expression of faith. This general idea here is they in order to exist in that way, they have to change the grace of God into a license for immorality. And how do you do that? Well, Paul addresses the same thing. Should we sin then that grace might abide? Paul raised the question because he's been teaching, along with the Hebrew writers, teaching the same thing. That the grace of God is in abundance, and that God is eager to bestow His grace on those who are His. So then, should we just, not worry about it and just ask for grace, and like we tend to do in contemporary church? Oh, we just do what we want to do, and we ask the Lord to forgive us. Clean my heart, Lord. Forgive me, Lord. Forgive me, Lord. Oh, while we're on our way to do what we got to do, He's just going to have to forgive me. I'm going to do this, that kind of thing. That's how we end up changing the grace of God into a license for immorality. Think about it. Grace, and this is something that a lot of people don't understand. Grace is not what you receive after you've done something that you should not have done. Grace is the element, the powerful element that prevents you from doing what it is that you're trying to do. Okay? That's the way that it's taught in the New Testament. We don't see it that way. We think grace is the cleanup word. No, grace is to keep you from needing to be cleaned up. His grace is sufficient to handle your desires. He understands what you're feeling. He understands what you're thinking about. However, your response to His understanding, your response to His care and his providential care of you is to move in favor of Him, to move on His behalf, to be Christ-centered rather than to chase after the issues of the flesh. Okay, free indulgence, now forms of depravity, sexual depravity, and any other form of depravity. People have used grace. God, Lord have mercy. We got grace. No, we don't have grace like that. Grace is not an excuse any more than advocacy is a statement, a reality that God, Jesus rather, speaks on our behalf when we sin. Jesus is the voice that notifies us that we're in sin. His advocacy is his justice. He points to it. He doesn't nurture us and hide us in our sinful state, but He brings us to understand this is our sinful nature, and then indeed to receive the redemption and to process it and to bring it into a consciousness of the way that you think, to appropriate the teachings, so that grace is at work, not grace that you get when you've already made a mess of things. That's not how it works. Okay, be mindful of that. Jude doesn't really give an explanation on how they deny, but it's embedded in the logic of the notion. You deny our only Master and Lord. You pervert the grace with your licentiousness and a pattern of self-pleasure, hedonism. Okay, so be mindful of that. Now, the fifth verse takes us into the warning against the false teachers. 3 and 4 gives us 2, 3, and 4 gives us a sense of his purpose for writing the letter, and then we get a sense of what changes that purpose. He was just writing to talk about the salvation that we share. That's a very powerful piece. And then it came clearly to him that he needed to make it put it under a microscope and draw nearer to the sourcing that you needed to focus on, which was what's happening in the community. So then he begins to focus them on faith contention, because there's pressure from the outside. to dismantle and allow for the grace of God to be perverted. So let's be clear on that. Okay, that's what occasions the letter. This is what he says now as he warns them against false teachers. He gives some examples of God's judgment and history, what he does. Now it's designed to remind you when you are fully informed once and for all that Jesus who saved the people out of the land of Egypt after destroyed those who did not believe. And the angel who did not keep their own position but deserted their proper dwelling, he has kept the eternal chains in the deepest darkness for the judgment of the great day. Likewise, Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding cities, which in the same manner as they indulged in sexual immorality and pursued unnatural lust, serve as an example by undergoing the punishment of eternal fire. Now, verses 5 through 7 are basically there to remind them of the experiences of God in judgment, of God in judgment, a God who was at this point tolerant of man, but judged what they did. You know, when I mentioned earlier that he was tolerant, that didn't mean that he didn't respond to it, but it was the idea that you have a nerve to reject the Mosaic law. Well, he wasn't like that. He saw the failure of the law. He saw their failure. He saw why the law failed because of their sinful nature, because the law was good, but it was their sinful nature. They could not handle the standard of the law. And so that made him tolerant of trying to find new ways. And he did that with the prophets, the judges, the monarchy. You know, then comes Jesus, his final movement. And that's what I'm trying to get you to understand. Jesus is the final effort he had to deal with reconciling his people back to himself. And so he wants to now warn the writers of this document judgment on false teachers, because he wants them to understand the magnitude of giving ear to those who would not honor him as the master, those who would treat those things that he did as miraculous and have no sense of the message of the miracle. So now I design to remind you that you are fully informed once and for all. And Jesus who saved the people out of the land of Egypt after he destroyed those that did not believe. I want you to get the dogmatic structure. Can I say it like that? I'm going to use the word dogmatism. In other words, there's a sense of God's way or no way, the Christ way or no way. That is the sense of it. It is. You have to believe. And this is the New Testament message. It's not unique to the Hebrew writer or to Jude or to this is New Testament. What we have a tendency to do as Christians. Well, you believe what you believe, and you believe what you believe, and you believe what you believe, and everybody got their own beliefs. That's an observation, for sure, but that is not the statement the believer makes. Because we're always contending for the faith, and we're always understanding, we understand that diversity is the saving ground. But to make war there eliminates Calvary's cross, which brings everybody to union. Trying to find union through a man-made effort, through power and authority, you'll never get unity that way. The only true sense of unity is found in the free will of God. Okay, so it's an intolerant God regarding the way and the means, but the process he's so involved. It is God who initiates his Christ. It is God who sustains us in his Christ, and it is God who culminates in the end to declare salvation. This is a God project. Okay. Um, just like Peter in his second epistle, Jude states that his readers already know what he's about to say, but he's going to remind them of that. I don't think the idea of reminding uh, one another what we believe, those things we already believe, that's powerful. You cannot deny that. That's powerful. Because the whole idea is that we are the ecclesia, the people of God, and we maintain the unity and the steadfastness of hope and the love, okay, and the work of faith. We maintain those elements in the body to maintain a strong body. So the idea here is that we're reminding, Peter's thing, I like that, we're reminding one another of those things that we already know. In fact, he gives three examples of the Lord's judgment on the believers at the time of the Exodus, on the believers on the fallen angels, and on the believers in terms of Sodom and Gomorrah. In each instant, the object of judgment are notable against the Lord. You can tell that right at the sticking point. Right at the sticking point, there is a sense of destruction. If I'm not, I mean, this is systematic. Listen, Jesus at the foot of the mountain after he did the sermon at the mount. Same thing, same message. Nicodemus and John, same message. The New Testament writers are focused on a kind of dogmatism, a kind of struggle to defend and safeguard the faith. We tend to want to safeguard and defend the church. I have a church down in 4th and Market Street. We got a good church, and our pastor and our choir. Woo! We're about all that. But when it comes to this biblical text, where the jewels actually rest for salvation, we are lackadaisical and loose in our consciousness, if you will, about what we need to be doing. But these three stories, these three examples, that is the Exodus, the fallen angels, and Sodom, all carry uh, the idea of the objects of judgment, are very notable. And anybody that rebels against suffer the consequences. And that's what happened in each one of the cases. When rebellion emerged, it brought about deeper judgment. So our learning curve for how to live before God is coming together with Jude. He wants us to see how the passion and fervor continue in the faith. I like that. Faith contention, power. Okay, now when we get to, let's see, if I want to go further. I don't think we need to go any further. I just wanted to get some sense of ministry to you guys for this book. We'll pick up with it, of course, next week at the 2 o'clock hour. But it was important to me to get something to you. Let's see. Anything else I can glean from my notes right now? Well, I guess we can say a little bit about them. The first example is that of Israel. who experienced a great delay of God's grace in the Exodus. We saw and heard his revelation at Sinai, and he received at Sinai, and he received his care in the wilderness. Yet a number of them disbelieved and rebelled. It was an interesting situation. And then, of course, Jude moves from Israel to, um, wow, let's see, after the fallen angels, yeah, fallen angels sequence. I don't really think I need to explain any of that to you guys. I think you guys pretty much can understand what I'm trying to get you to see about the book of Jude. He's very straightforward about embracing brother's teaching. And this probably has a lot to do with the fact that he and James were not very supportive of Jesus when he was young. At a certain point, they wanted him to step out, and refused to do that. You remember the issue going to the Festival of Jerusalem. Jesus actually did go, but not as they wanted him to go. Now notice that the angels who did not keep their own position desired a proper dwelling, that particular verse, the judgment. So we get a sense of, from the Hebrew writer, there is distinct, overwhelming, powerful judgment of God, who is sovereign in nature, who is patient, and who waits his chances, his opportunities to do his work. But the God of heaven, our God, is judgmental regarding the work of the Christ. It's important to hear that, okay? There are eternal chains on those false teachers of old. And that's a statement of the deepest darkness of the judgment for the great day. Okay, we have these. Notice that he's tied down the angels, which is still contributing to the earlier teaching on Jesus being superior to the angels. Okay, he gave us a sense of Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding cities. In the same manner, they indulged as they wanted to indulge, and pursued all kinds of unnatural lusts. Jude says, checking the notes, make sure that I'm getting that. Look, I think we pretty much this idea in Jude. I just wanted to capture that so that you can have a sense of what's happening as you read these early verses. Stay with the notion that Jude is setting forth with defending for the faith, and begin to process that now in your own. It doesn't do much good to study the Bible just for studying the Bible sake. The study in the Hebrew is not just sitting down and studying, reading, but it's a consumption. It's consumption. It's you read something and you read it until you understand it so well that you can speak it. You can say it because it's ingrained in you. Yeah. So, well, having said that, we'll just leave it there, and we'll make this a short discussion, but nonetheless, a discussion of sorts. Okay. We hope that we said something that gives you some sense of mind and body and soul as you think in terms of moving forward and upward towards God. Okay. Y'all be good. I hope I've said something that afforded you an opportunity to do a little bit of thinking, challenge your comfort zone just a little bit. Consider this unknown writer.
Well, it seems our time in the Zoom room has come and gone. We look forward to seeing you again on next Wednesday at 2 p.m. here in Bettye's Zoom room. Would you consider subscribing to our YouTube channel? And if you do, be sure to ring the bell so that the notification can go out every time we open the book. God bless your hearts, and we'll see you when we see you.